the voicemail on my kitchen counter and walked to the window. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the argument, not the lawyers, not even the money. I keep coming back to that moment, standing at the window, watching the rain come down on the backyard where my son used to play, and realizing that everything I thought I knew about my own family was wrong. Let me back up. My name is Leonard. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years working as an electrician in Knoxville, Tennessee union work, honest work, the kind that leaves your hands rough and your back sore but lets you sleep at night. I retired 4 years ago when my knees started giving me trouble on the job site. My wife, Carol, passed 9 years ago from ovarian cancer. It was fast, the way those things sometimes go. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. We had been married 38 years. After Carol died, it was just me and my son, Miles. Miles was 41 when all of this happened. He worked in sales, software sales, the kind where you wear a blazer on Zoom calls and talk about solutions and pipelines. I never fully understood what he sold, but I knew it paid well because he told me often enough. He and his wife Amber lived about 20 minutes from me in a newer subdivision out past the highway. Nice neighborhood, big houses, the kind of development where every lawn looks the same, because the HOA has rules about it. I was proud of Miles. I want to say that plainly before I say anything else. I was proud of him. I raised him mostly alone after Carol got sick the first time, and then fully alone after she was gone. I worked overtime when he was in high school, so he could go to a good college. I co-signed his first car loan when he was 23. When he and Amber got married, I paid for the rehearsal dinner and gave them $15,000 to help with the down payment on their first house. I did all of that because that's what fathers do. At least that's what I believed. I never thought of it as giving him his inheritance early. It was just love. The trouble started, or I should say the trouble that I noticed started, about 18 months ago. I had gone to the ATM at my bank branch on Millertown Pike to take out some cash for a handyman I'd hired to fix the gutters. He preferred cash. Lots of older tradespeople do. I put in my card, typed my PIN, and the machine told me my available balance was $412. I stood there on the sidewalk in the October cold and read that number 3 times. My checking account should have had somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 in it. That's what I keep in there. My Social Security comes in each month, my small pension from the union, and I'd always maintained a cushion. Always. Carol and I learned that lesson early in our marriage when a car repair wiped us out one August, and we swore we'd never let the checking account run low again. $412. I thought there must be a mistake. I went inside and asked the teller to print my transaction history. She handed me 3 pages, and I sat down on the bench near the door and read through them right there in the branch. In the previous 6 months, someone had made 41 ATM withdrawals from my account. They ranged from $200 to $500 each. They came from machines all over town, one near the community college, one at a gas station off the interstate, a few from a grocery store I had never set foot in. The withdrawals happened on weekdays, mostly in the afternoons. There were so many of them that they blended into the account activity like noise. I had not seen them because I had stopped checking my account closely. After Carol died, I had a few years where the paperwork of daily life felt overwhelming. The bills, the statements, the insurance forms, and I developed a habit of just logging in to confirm direct deposits had arrived and then logging back out. I wasn't careless with money. I just wasn't watching closely enough. The PIN on that account was 1814, October 14th. October 14th, the day Carol and I got married in 1986. I drove home from the bank in a kind of fog. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before I did anything. The handyman was coming at 2 o'clock and I didn't have the cash for him. I had to write him a check and apologize, which embarrassed me more than I want to admit. After he left, I called my bank's fraud line and told them what I'd found. They opened an investigation and told me to come in the next day to speak with someone in person. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept running through possibilities. A skimmer at an ATM somewhere. A data breach. Some stranger who had gotten hold of my card number. But the PIN kept stopping me. Our anniversary. I had never written it down anywhere. I had never told it to a bank employee or typed it into a website. The only people in the world who knew that number were people who knew the significance of that date. I have a sister in Chattanooga, but she doesn't need my money and wouldn't take it if she did. Carol's sister lives in Phoenix. My neighbors are retired school teachers who bring me tomatoes from their garden in the summer. By the time I fell asleep, I had already begun to suspect, and the suspicion felt like swallowing glass. Miles called me the next morning, which he did most Thursdays. We talked about football and the weather, and whether I'd had my furnace serviced yet. Normal conversation. I listened to his voice the whole time, trying to hear something different in it. I didn't say anything about the bank. I met with a fraud specialist at the bank that afternoon, a patient woman named Ms. Trevino who walked me through everything methodically. The withdrawals had been made with my physical debit card, not a cloned card, my actual card. She asked me when I had last seen the card in my possession. I had a spare card, a backup that the bank had sent me 2 years ago when they upgraded their card system. I'd never activated it because I already had a working card. I kept it in the small wooden box on my dresser where I keep things I don't need immediately. An old watch, some cufflinks from my father, a few folded papers. I went home and checked the box. The backup card was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. My bedroom door was open, and I could see the hallway and the small framed photos on the wall. Miles at his Little League game, Miles at his prom, Miles and Amber at their wedding. I looked at those photos, and I felt something shift inside me that I don't have a good word for. It wasn't anger yet. It was more like the ground moving. Miles had been in my house dozens of times in the past 2 years. He helped me move furniture when I had the floors refinished. He came over to help me set up a new TV last Christmas. He'd been in my bedroom at least twice that I could remember. Once to help me look for a document I'd misplaced. The pin. The spare card. I kept circling back to those 2 facts. I called him that Friday evening. I told him I'd had some trouble with my bank account and asked if he'd be willing to come by Saturday morning to help me sort through some paperwork. He said, of course, no problem. He'd be there at 10. He showed up with a coffee for me, which is the kind of thing that made all of this so much harder. I had the printed transaction history on the kitchen table. I had my bank statement open on my laptop. I didn't accuse him right away. I just told him what I'd found. The withdrawals, the missing backup card, the amounts, and watched his face. He was good. I'll give him that. He looked confused, then concerned. He leaned over the statements and shook his head slowly. He said that was terrible, that it must be some kind of fraud, that I should really consider freezing my accounts. He said all the right things. And then I said quietly, Miles, who else knows my pin is Carol's and my anniversary date? He went very still. There was a silence that probably lasted 4 or 5 seconds, but felt much longer. He picked up his coffee cup, set it back down without drinking, and then he said, Dad, I think you need to talk to your bank about fraud protection. He didn't answer the question. I told him I wanted him to answer the question. I told him that calmly. I wasn't yelling. Carol always said I had a way of getting quieter as I got more serious, and I suppose that was true that morning. Miles put his hands on the table and looked down at them, and then he said something that I have replayed in my mind more times than I can count. He said, Dad, you have more money than you need. You're retired. You live alone. You don't go anywhere. He paused. Amber and I have been going through a hard stretch. Her sister needed help. The truck payment was behind. I was going to tell you. I was going to pay it back. I asked him how much he had taken. He said he wasn't sure of the exact amount. I told him I was. I told him it was $22,640 over 6 months. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, It's not stealing, Dad. It's family. I've thought about those 4 words many times since that morning. It's not stealing, Dad. As if the relationship changed the nature of the act. As if the fact that I loved him made it acceptable to empty my account while I sat in the next room thinking we were fine. I asked him to leave. He tried to talk more on the way out, something about how I had always made him feel like he had to be perfect, about how I'd never understood the pressure he was under. about how Carol would have wanted me to help him. He said Carol's name, and that was when I stopped being quiet. I told him to get out of my house. He left. I stood at the window and watched his truck pull out of the driveway and disappear around the corner. Then I went back to the bank. I did not change my PIN that day, and I want to explain why, because I know some people will find that strange. When I went back to the bank on Saturday afternoon, I spoke again with Ms. Trevino and also with the branch manager, a man named Mr. Okafor. I told them what I had learned, that I believed the withdrawals had been made by my son, using a backup card he had taken from my home, with a PIN he had known because of its personal significance. Mr. Bose. Okafor explained to me that if I changed everything immediately and closed the old account, it might complicate the investigation and the documentation. He strongly recommended I contact an attorney before making any account changes, and that I let the fraud investigation proceed while everything was still intact. He also told me I could freeze my account's ATM function so no new withdrawals could be made. I did that immediately. I went home and called an attorney, a man named Mr. Whitfield who had handled some property paperwork for me years ago. He was patient and thorough. He told me that what Miles had done constituted theft by deception under Tennessee law, regardless of the family relationship. He asked me to gather every piece of documentation I could. He also told me something I hadn't considered. If Miles had taken the backup card from my home without permission, there was a potential burglary component as well, depending on how a prosecutor chose to look at it. I spent the following week pulling together statements, printing records, writing down dates and details while they were still fresh. I wrote down the conversation at my kitchen table as completely as I could remember it. His exact words, my exact words, the sequence of it. My attorney told me that contemporaneous notes can be valuable, and I wanted to make sure I remembered everything correctly. During that week, Amber called me twice. I didn't answer the first time. The second time I picked up. She said that Miles had told her everything and that she was horrified. She said she'd had no idea. She said she was sorry. Then, about a minute into the call, her tone shifted, and she said, "Leonard, he's your son. You're not really going to go to the police over money." She said the word money the way someone says just before it. Just money, just a loan, just family. I told her that $22,000 was not an abstract amount to me. I told her it represented almost 2 years of my union pension. I told her that I had worked on job sites for 31 years to put that money aside, and that her husband had taken it 41 times, using a pin tied to the date I buried my wife. She didn't have anything to say to that. I told her that if Miles wanted to talk to me, he knew where I was. She said she'd tell him. He didn't call. My attorney filed a civil complaint 3 weeks after our kitchen table conversation. The bank fraud investigation had also concluded that the withdrawals were made from my physical backup card, which I had reported as taken without my consent. They flagged the activity formally. Miles hired an attorney of his own, which, given what Amber had told me about their financial situation, I assumed went on a credit card somewhere. There were conversations through attorneys, the way these things go. Miles's attorney sent a letter suggesting that there was ambiguity about whether the withdrawals constituted theft or a family loan arrangement. My attorney sent back a letter pointing out that no loan agreement existed. No promissory note had been signed. The card had not been given to Miles with my knowledge or permission, and my own statements to the bank at the time of discovery made no mention of any loan. The word ambiguity did not survive long. 4 months after that Saturday morning conversation, Miles agreed to a settlement, full repayment of the $22,640 structured over 18 months with a formal promissory note, an admission that the withdrawals were unauthorized, and a provision that my attorney could file a civil judgment immediately if he missed a single payment. His first payment arrived on a Monday morning via certified check. I sat with it for a moment before depositing it. I thought about Carol, and about October 14th, and about the wooden box on my dresser, which now holds 1 fewer things than it used to. I changed my PIN that afternoon. I want to say something about the period after all of this, because I think people assume that winning, if you can call it that, makes everything feel better. It doesn't. Not right away. I spent a long time thinking about where I had failed. Not in the way Miles tried to imply that I'd made him feel like he had to be perfect, but in real ways. Had I given too easily for too long? Had the mortgage help, the down payment money, the co-signed loan created something in him that made my savings feel available, like a fund he was already entitled to? I don't know the full answer to that. I'm not sure there is a full answer. People make choices and then justify them afterward, and no amount of generosity on my end fully explains away what he did. But I've had to sit with the discomfort of that question anyway. I've also had to figure out what my relationship with my son looks like now. We have not spoken personally in the time since the settlement was agreed to. The certified checks arrive on schedule. I don't know if we'll ever have a real conversation again. Some nights I think we might, eventually, when enough time has passed. Other nights I'm not sure I want to. I miss who I thought he was. I'm still figuring out who he actually is. What I know is this: I have my account back. I have a promissory note with legal teeth. I have a record that says clearly, in writing, that what happened was not a loan and was not ambiguous. And I changed the PIN. The new one has nothing to do with Carol's anniversary. That date belongs to her and to me, not to a bank machine. I keep it somewhere no one can borrow it without asking. I go to the cemetery on October 14th every year. I bring two things: carnations because Carol preferred them over roses, and a thermos of the terrible instant coffee I've never learned to stop drinking. I sit with her for a while and tell her about the year. This past October I had more to tell her than usual. I sat there in the quiet and I didn't know whether to feel like I had won something or lost something. I think maybe both. I think that's the honest answer. Some betrayals don't leave you with a clean victory. They leave you with the truth, which is smaller and harder and doesn't look like anything you expected. But the truth is something. After everything, the truth is still something. I drove home as it was getting dark, stopped for gas, checked my account balance on my phone while I was standing at the pump. A habit I've had every single day since October, twice a day sometimes. It was exactly what it should have been. I put my phone in my pocket and drove the rest of the way home. I've thought a lot about what I could have done differently. Not in a self-punishing way, just honestly. Because I think that's what you owe yourself when something like this happens. You sit with it until you understand it, not just feel it. The thing about Miles taking that money isn't only that he took it, it's that he had constructed an entire story in his head where taking it was reasonable, where my savings were already partly his, where my years of working and going without and putting money aside had somehow become a shared resource he could access quietly, without asking, without telling me. He had decided, on his own, that the relationship gave him permission. And that's the part that stays with me, not the dollar amount, not even the 41 withdrawals. It's that he never asked. In all those months, he never once picked up the phone and said, "Dad, I'm struggling, can you help me?" I would have helped him. I want to say that plainly. If he had called me and told me the truth, I would have written him a check, and probably told him not to worry about paying it back. That's the particular cruelty of what he chose instead. He traded a conversation for a theft, and in doing so he turned something I would have given freely into something that required lawyers and certified checks and a promissory note with legal teeth. I think about that when people ask me whether I feel bad about taking him to court. I don't feel bad. I feel sad, which is different. Feeling bad implies I did something wrong. What I did was insist that what happened be named correctly and that there be consequences proportional to the act. That's not cruelty. That's just refusing to pretend. It's something I've come to believe about the way people treat you over time. It usually tells you something true about what they actually think of you, not what they say, but what they do when they think you're not watching. Miles thought I was too old and too settled and too trusting to notice. He thought the combination of my grief and my habits and my love for him added up to something he could use. He was wrong about the last part, but he wasn't wrong that I had made myself easy not to notice. That's on me, not the theft. The theft is entirely on him. But the not paying attention, the letting the statements pile up, the assuming everything was fine because it always had been. That was a habit I had to break, and I've broken it. I check my accounts every single day now. It takes about 45 seconds. It's not that I expect to find something wrong. It's that the act of checking is itself a decision. A decision to stay present in my own life, to not let the business of being alive go unattended just because it's uncomfortable or tedious. Carol used to say that the difference between people who get taken advantage of and people who don't usually isn't intelligence. It's attention. She was right about most things. I don't know what comes next with my son. I genuinely don't. The checks arrive on time, and that's all I know about where he is or what he's thinking. Maybe one day he'll call and say something true. Maybe he won't. Either way, I know now that I can't build anything real with someone who only tells me the truth when there's no other option. That's not a relationship. That's just weather. Something that happens to you. What I have is this. My account is whole, my attorney's number is in my phone, and I know exactly what my balance should be on any given day of the month. I have my Thursdays free and my Octobers back. I have the cemetery and the carnations and the terrible instant coffee, and the knowledge that Carol's anniversary belongs to her memory now and not to a bank machine. That's enough. Some days it's more than enough.